And welcome back to Code to Cloud. This week's topic, we're going to talk about vibe coding. And I've got a special guest on. I've got Gene Kim. Gene, welcome to the show.
Kevin, great to be on. I so much enjoyed the episode that you did with Gil a couple weeks ago. It was so fun to hear about infrastructure and operations people building cool things. And by the way, congratulations on the new role. You deserve it.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. But yeah, I'm absolutely happy to have you on, right? Do you just want to give a quick introduction about, who you are, what you've done previously, and then obviously let's talk about the next big thing, right, around vibe coding, because I know you've got a new book out around that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've been studying high-performing technology organizations for 26 years, and that was a journey that started back when I was the CTO and founder of a company called Tripwire way back in 1998. I was there for 13 years. But yeah, the goal was to study these amazing organizations that simultaneously had the best project due date performance in development, the best operational reliability and stability in ops, as well as the best posture, security, and compliance. And the goal was to understand, how did all those amazing organizations make their good to great transformation so other organizations could replicate those amazing outcomes. And so, in that 26-year journey, one of the biggest surprises was how it took me into the middle of the DevOps movement. And so I co-authored a book called The Phoenix Project that came out in 2013. The DevOps Handbook that was supposed to come out at the same time came out in 2016. Co-wrote the Accelerate book with Dr. Nicole Forsgren and Jess Humble. In between the Unicorn Project and Winning the Winning Organization, that was just amazing. Sort of getting to work with Dr. Steven Spear, who's at the MIT Sloan School of Business. Really, just to study deeply what's in common between Agile and DevOps and the Toyota Production System and lean manufacturing and so forth. But the latest adventure has been working with a guy whose work I've admired for 12 years. His name is Steve Yegge. He wrote the kind of the famous memo that depicted the Jeff Bezos edict that kicked off the dismantling of the Amazon monolith back in say 2011 or so. I'm sorry, in the early 2000s. That led to the two pizza teams that created tens, hundreds, and eventually thousands of microservices that led them to enable them to do 136,000 deployments per day back in 2015. Anyway, so one of the things that I met him in last June, it turned out one of our passions was how to use AIs to help us write cool things, right? In terms of developing applications to help bring AI into the work. And one of our conclusions was that the days of writing code by hand are coming to an end. In fact, we stole that line from another famous Microsoft person, Dr. Eric Meyer. He was part of Visual Basic. He was one of the leaders of the C# initiative, Link and so forth. And I was just amazing to hear him say that, right? Someone who's dedicated decades of his life to making great programming languages. So, like, why? How could he say something, as audacious that as we will no longer be writing code by hand? But I think everything that we've learned in the last 14 months has shown, I think that really is true. We will not type code in by hand. Instead, it will come through conversations with an AI that comes from iteration. And so we decided to write a book together. And I'm just so delighted that Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, wrote the foreword to it. And he said, absolutely, right? As one of the premier engineering organizations, we expect every developer, to be using, agentic coding, agentic DevOps like practices, to make us better developers. And so I'll just say, I've never had as much fun as right now. It's just, I've never wrote as much code as now. I've stopped counting lines of code probably a couple months ago. All I know is I'm building things that I want faster. In fact, in the book, we call it FAFO: faster, more ambitious, alone or autonomous, fun, and you can create tons of option values because you can explore all the options, maybe even all at once. And so I think there's never been a better time to be developers. And as you and I were talking, before we started recording, everyone's going to be a developer, right? Infrastructure and operations, QA, designers, product managers, right? I mean, there's going to be so many people. All the people sort of around development are going to become developers. I mean, it's never been a better time to be in the game, which is why I'm so happy for you that you're going to be in the thick of it in your new role. So, my heartiest congratulations to you, Kevin.
Yeah, I again, like we were talking about, my transition from sysadmin, right, to server manager to using development tools and writing code. And especially now with like the agentic support, as I like to call it, right,
Mhm.
is just, it's crazy. I've been doing some projects the past 12 months that would have taken 6 months or more, and we've managed to get it out in 6 weeks just because we've got those agents that are helping us, right, get up and running with. I mean, I use it a lot for reverse engineering, right? If there's an idea or something I want to learn, I'll use it to help me reverse engineer something, which accelerates, right, whatever it is I'm trying to do. That's just how my mind works, right?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I mean, I can share you two stories that I mean just were very transformative for me. I mean, I remember, Steve Yagi. He's such a great guy, right? I mean, what makes him so? He spent 20 years at Amazon and then Google, and so in very part of the growth phases of that, and so he'll help build the developer tooling in both organizations. And for me, when we were talking, he said, "Hey, sometimes let's pair together and let's build something." And so I was like, "Oh my gosh, what an incredible opportunity!" I was so honored that he offered that. And that was in August, and the next question was like, "Okay, what do I want to build?" And it turns out like one of the things that I've been doing for years, like almost a decade, is I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of YouTube videos, and whenever I hear something interesting, I'll take a screenshot of it, just because I want to go back and sort of maybe create a. I would, in the ideal, I would go back and actually write out exactly what was said, what was so interesting, maybe write about it, etc. So on my phone, I have like 3,000 screenshots taken over the last 12 years. Basically ever since I got an iPhone, however many years that is. And- But how many times have I actually gone back into one of those screenshots and like went back to find the podcast, find the episode, get the transcript, and highlight? There's like maybe 5 times like in the last decade. And so I was like, okay, what I really want to build is, given these screenshots, wrote some code to basically, take it down to a timestamp. But what I'd really love to do is take the timestamps, the video, the transcript, and create like video excerpts, like you might see on social media, where they kind of excerpt the best parts of a talk. And we built that in 47 minutes, using FFmpeg, etc. And like, that was like one of the most amazing experiences, right? Because I mean, could I have done it? Could I have learned all the FFmpeg commands? Maybe, right? I've used FFmpeg maybe 5 to 10 times, and I know what my limits are. And for us to be able to like write it together in 47 minutes, with the majority of it, I would say like 10, 15 minutes would just explain what I was trying to do. And having an AI help, in a chat format do that. And so you can't have a moment like that that doesn't change your life. More recently, he was down here in Portland, Oregon, and we're sort of getting ready for create like a training workshop for technology leaders. And we had some time at the end of the day, and the exercise was like, we've got an hour. Let's see if we can really push ourselves to build something that would normally be even more ambitious than what we would take on. I'm like, okay, I would like to write a podcast app. Instead of picking screenshots, maybe I push a button, I can actually annotate it, and have a combination YouTube player. So I, put in a prompt, help me write a podcast YouTube player in React Native. Had the podcast player running in 20 minutes and the YouTube player running in like at the 50-minute mark. And
That's
now,
that's wild, right? Think about it.
totally. And so it's replaced. I remember like that was just kind of the first draft. 2 weeks later, I install it before a long drive, and it replaced Overcast, which been using for like 10 plus years. So, I mean, like it's life changing.
Yeah, similar story. I was speaking to someone at the weekend, and they were, I think they're in their final years of university. Anyway, they had a section on building iOS apps. He's never done it before. He built a game for the Apple Watch
Yeah.
where it created a gyro, all with AI, and he did it in like a day. And I was just,
I've tried before, right? I mean, I remember probably 6 years ago, I tried building a React Native app, and I spent like 2 afternoons on it, and all I had was a mess. Didn't compile, didn't run, certainly didn't get running on my phone. And it's just, I think those are the, experiences that really informs the opinion that, no developer should be writing code by hand. I mean, one of the talks I really enjoyed at Microsoft Build was Dave Fowler, right? The famous Dave Fowler, right? Distinguished engineer. And he's talking about how he's, fixing these longstanding issues in .NET, at the very bottom of the stack that developers use, right? To improve like regular expression parsing performance, and, fix these memory leak issues that have been around for over a decade. So anyone who says that, vibe coding is, just for people running flight simulator games to post on YouTube is like, oh no, you are sorely mistaken. There are so many activities that developers do every day that they should not be doing that. They should be inviting AI into their work.
So, what is vibe coding, and how does it differentiate between what we've done previously? What
Yeah,
sets
we
us up?
Yeah, in our book, we define we have a very broad definition, which is basically any time when you're not writing code by hand, when you're not typing code out, typing every letter. Instead, it is coming from a conversation through iteration with an AI, and so that's a pretty expansive definition. But I think it's also one that very much resonates with me, right? And we don't say what kind of tool, what kind of technologies, but we are just saying that you don't want to be hunched over a computer and peering at the screen, right? In fact, I associate programming to me, until last year, I had kind of a posture in mind, right? You're kind of hunched over, you're peering at the screen, you're looking at every line, you're trying to understand it. It's like it's not there anymore, right? I mean, there are moments when you do, but often you are working at a much higher level, being very specific about what are you trying to build. What's the specification? You know, how do you define it in a way that is testable, right? That you're not winging it, but you're actually using all the same engineering instincts that we've built over decades, and we're using it to help the AI generate the code for us in a way that is like real engineering. In fact, yeah, Steve Yagi has this amazing phrase like, "What do engineers do?" Especially with cloud, right? Engineering is what was required to take this fundamentally unreliable technology, right, and make it reliable, right? So to bring highly available systems using unreliable databases, data stores, compute, storage, etc., right? And create the abstraction so that it appears like it's highly available. And we are slowly watching the industry cobble those together, those tools, but um, we don't have to wait for that, right? The benefits are already so huge. In the book, we say even if the state of AI froze forever, right? For the next 10 years, basically what we got, this whole exponential curve flattens off. If we are stuck with what we got now, you would be insane not to take advantage of it because of the FAFO benefits. Faster, you can be more ambitious. You can do things alone. You can have more fun doing it and explore such a larger option space. How am I doing? Does this resonate with the mental model that you have, Kevin?
For sure, right? Because like for me, sometimes it is lonely. To your point, I mean that's a
Yes.
great point to raise. Like you're sitting there trying to figure out how this works, or you may have an extensive team, right, on Slack or whatever it may be, but just asking those, I like to call them stupid questions, like
Oh
why
yeah.
why doesn't it work, right? Like you're already doing those peer reviews before it's even being pushed right up to a Git tree, right, to whatever it may be to get it committed or have a peer review done there. And I that's what I really like about it. It's like, will my code work? I want to do this. Like I've got this idea. Is it even possible?
Yeah.
And
I've got two stories to share with you just to resonate with
go
that.
for it.
So I mean, I became one of my favorite quotes in the book came from our friend Andrew Flick, right? I mean, he too was an MVP in C sharp. He was very highly technical, and then he was recognized as having a real gift for marketing, and then he became non-technical, right? And in the book we say, he was once a C sharp MVP, one of the top in the game, and then the only programming he does now is on the PUI stack: PowerPoint, Word, and Excel. And I too became like that. When I joined Tripwire, I wrote my last production line of code probably around 1999, 2000. And so, for the next 15 years, I was writing small scripts, maybe in Python or Ruby, but never really in anger, never supporting production services. But in 2016, my life changed when I decided to learn a functional programming language called Clojure that runs on the JVM, and it was so rewarding. It brought the joy of development back into my life. Nowhere compared to now. When you say lonely, oh my gosh, it's this alien. I mean, it's sort of like F sharp, right? Very kind of different than imperative programming. It's kind of a classic for the steep learning curve. And I was alone. Like I couldn't even. I was trying to write this program to sort of reverse a bibliography list, and I couldn't figure out how to do it in a non-imperative style. And I must have carried that problem with me for around 9 to 10 months, where I got something running. I posted in GitHub, but I mean, it didn't work all the time. And just the idea of like having this friend that could just explain it to me, where I can ask questions, right? I don't understand. Tell me again. Is just as I would have. How valuable would that have been for me? I had a couple people I could call, but I was very sparing about. I didn't want to bother them with these my really, stupid questions. But I had the same problem with Git, right? Git is so hard. And there are a couple times when I've gotten into real trouble with Git where I maybe force pushed something in main and blew away the main branch, and I had to call someone from the airport. It's like, help! I just deleted the entire repo. It's like, okay, hang on, I'll call you in about an hour. I still routinely get into positions in Git where I can't merge, or I don't know how to. I still barely know what a rebase is. There are certain conditions where like I can't push, right? But with things like Claude Code, Codex, Cursor, GitHub Copilot, right? You can just say, "Do it for me." Like merge these 52 merge conflicts in, and it will happily do it. I mean, it is. These are program can be so hard. Writing anything with a UI is so much more difficult than it was, say, 30 years ago. Git is so hard compared to, say, SourceSafe, which is what I kind of grew up with using. And so that you can get so much help and have the AI just do it for you. It's so amazing. And Kevin, I trust that you've got to have similar stories where AI has helped you from kind of sticky situations that normally would have required calling a really good friend to come and help you.
For sure. And do you know what? Git's a great example because like everyone expects you to know Git. It's a bit like using Microsoft Word, right? Like everyone expects you to know how to use the basics of that. So I'm really great. Really glad you brought that as an example. Do you know what it was for me? It's reverse engineer again. It's reverse engineer. So I get given something, and I work with some really talented people, and they're very busy. And to your point, you sort of don't want to bother them, right? So it's like, okay, well, I've got a project deadline, and I've got like I don't know. 8,000 line manifest for Terraform.
For instance, oddly
Yeah, for
specific.
instance, right? Yeah, it's pretty big, right? And then you're trying to deploy it and you're running into problems, or you're running into what is actually being deployed, or you hit this barrier. And as soon as it's like verbosed out into the terminal, which again, in my instance, I'm a Copilot fan, right? GitHub
Yep.
Copilot fan. So put that in there. What's going on?
Yeah. Help.
Do this, help, right? Do this, and this. And even if it doesn't get it on the first try, you'll get it on the second or third, right? And it's just like I fixed the problem. And so, again, to your point, not waiting an hour or calling someone up or trying to beg, borrow, and steal someone's time to try and help you, right? To get out of the situation. But that I think that's the thing for me is having that support mechanism there is really good, right? And again, you get out your comfort zone a little bit more as well. So back to your point, the ideation point of I want to try this, and this.
Yeah. In fact,
Phenomenal.
in our book, we had we walked through. Part one is like the why of vibe coding. The second is some of the theory, and first steps. Third is like practices and patterns, and the fourth one is going big. From how do you sort of implement this as a team or team of teams level. And in the second section, we have a section of like just do the impossible, and we both put in kind of our kind of things that we put off for decades. And for me, one of them was are you tired of something in a NoSQL, MongoDB like database, and you just keep hitting the quota, so you have to manually delete data? How about you migrate some of that to MySQL, right? How about finishing your migration from MySQL 5 to MySQL 8, and how about writing, finally getting around to deleting all the GitHub branches that are that I was just laying around because I've never had to clean them up before, or because I don't know how. And so we wrote about 8 little mini projects. All of them were things that Steve and I did and deferred, right? Because it was just either the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, or it was just tedious stuff that involved learning new things that just the payoff wasn't there. And just to have the AI be able to do that for you, it's just it changes the entire economics of building software, and it changes what you build and why. I mean, it is. I use the word life changing maybe too often when it comes to this, but that's the way I feel. It's just changed how the problems I work on. I'm tending to write a couple tools every week. In fact, I had to write 35 emails. That was kind of mostly a form letter, and it was just tediously copy and pasting. And I was so worried. I would I want to customize each one because each one of these is like a personal letter. And I'm so afraid of like sending the wrong letter to the wrong person. And I got through. Someone was actually watching me do this because it was that important, and I got only like halfway through. So I promised them that I would do it. In the evening at 7 p.m. I'm like, this sucks. I just hate doing this. In 20 minutes, I had a program that was actually doing it for me, right? Turn it from a tedious, stressful exercise to a joyful one, where, I could just assemble these, the to and subject and the email very quickly, and then just keyboard accelerators to copy it to my clipboard. And I was done within an hour and 10 minutes. I mean, it was just awesome. Sorry for rambling. I'm just,
No, no,
I'm just,
that's great because to your point, right? I like to call it a Richard Branson moment. You know the famous story about Richard Branson, right? He obviously is amazing at running businesses, right, and has the Virgin brands all over the world.
yes.
And he talked about this all the time. He was highly dyslexic and he couldn't write, so he would say to people, "Well, I just got someone else to write it for me, so I could." And it just sounds so simple, right? But it was like a eureka moment, right? And I always sort of take that forward with me, and I just really think that's where this is going to take us. To your point, you're writing tools to either move data from one platform to another, so it gives you more breathing room, or producing tools that will help you. I would be terrified of sending the wrong letter, right? That's something I would do as well, personally, right? So yeah, that's phenomenal. I just want to sort of regroup on that because that's something we've been working on in industry as well for a little while now. Is there's these applications that are out there that I was sitting down with somebody the other day and they went, "Do you know when this software was made?" And I went, "No." And they went, "1988." Right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Sure, you can put that in a container, Kevin." Let's see. Guess what you do? Get the source code, run it through the agentic AI model, right? How do I modernize this so it can run on a modern platform? And we're starting to see a lot of that. So taking those like big legacy, heavy, the power in the world, right? They're still out there in the background running so much critical services and they can't be moved, right? And I feel like that's where the agentic tool sets are going to really help us out, right? Is modernizing them because, yeah.
Yeah, no question. And yeah, I'm running this conference that's on in a couple weeks. It's at September 23rd to 25th, and it's all about there's so many experience reports from technology leaders about them doing the impossible, right? It's like we have this Drupal app that we were afraid to touch. No one's touched in like 5 years, right? And when it was something really important, you would bring in a specialist, right? And you expect it. You have to onboard them, and basically expect in about a month. And they said, we did it in a day with a developer, right, who's never used Drupal before. I mean, it's just um, all these problems. I don't want to be naive about it, but there are all these problems that are just become very tractable. In fact, Steve Yecke, one of the really touching stories in the book that we open up the book on. He's been working on this game for 35 years. I mean, it's been this labor of love. And, at one point there were hundreds of thousands of people on it. And at a certain point he gave up. He's like, there's hundreds of person years of work on this, right? And it just seemed endless. There was just no there, just given the rate of which bugs could be fixed. And so he put it in a maintenance mode. And then he had this sort of aha moment when the first agentic coding tools came out. In this case, that was Claude Code, and he did something in a day that would have required like weeks. And so he did some math. Like it's not hundreds of person years; it's months. It's hundreds of maybe months, maybe tens of months. And so that changes. So now that's on the front burner again. And so he's actually doing a rewrite. So instead of the game is called um oh geez, I'll remember it. But he's doing a rewrite where there's apps that run on the desktop, it runs on Steam, it runs on iOS and Android, and he's doing a rewrite potentially a couple ways. React Native, and he said actually maybe the better target is Flutter and Dart. And so this is the optionality that AI gives you, and it's just breathing this entirely new life into this project. So it's just amazing. Just so many things that were impossible now become within reach.
So we're scaling faster, we're learning faster, and time to market is faster, right? Regardless of what it is, right? Using these agentic tools.
Oh
And
yeah, in fact, yeah, from a kind of a sysadmin thing, right? I mean, there's this tool that he wrote in, I think it was Ruby. It was like 3,000 lines of Ruby. It's basically like the Azure tools like AWS and so forth, right? So where it's how you create the staging environments, it's how you connect the database, all this stuff. And it no longer works. It hasn't worked on his particular laptop in like 7 years because of just Ruby gems and stuff. And so the notion was like, can I rewrite it into Kotlin so it runs on the JVM? The answer is yes, you could have, but it never would have been worth the effort because it worked for most of the people on most of the machines. And so we tried in December, didn't work. Tried in January, didn't work, and tried again in March, and it worked. Right, it was just amazing to see like how these things that normally you would never be able to economically justify suddenly become doable. Not the entire thing in a day, but certainly you're getting some functionality written and value out of it, within a day. Crazy.
if you got any tales of when it goes wrong, vibe
No.
coding? I
Oh my
mean,
gosh.
I always see it as a rite of passage, me personally. You got to cause an outage. This is a career milestone, right? And to your point, either blow a database or a Git repo away, right? Like,
Oh my gosh, you are oddly, man. That's our list. In fact, yeah. So yeah, it's not like vibe coding is a silver bullet. I mean, in fact, uh, we have made some horrendous mistakes, and we talk about like the dark side of FAFO, the anti-FAFO. I personally created haunted code bases that were impossible to
haunted.
understand, impossible to change. Right? It's like because it was so non-modular, right, and it was just so difficult to understand. One of someone supported the writing of the book, so this was like a production app that we're using every day in the last 45 days of the book we write. And I actually had to take 3 days, while Steve was out of pocket for a bit. I used every minute of it, to rewrite it, just so that it could be testable and changeable. Steve has these amazing stories of blowing away entire repos. It disables unit tests. It can do some horrific things, which absolutely makes the point that as an engineer, as a builder, you cannot abdicate responsibility to the AI. Right? This is your responsibility. So you have to make sure it's testable. You have to set high standards. Uh, and so, yeah, I actually love giving. I mentioned that I do a lot of programming in Clojure, and so it has this REPL environment where you can talk to the live running system. Even in production, maybe not the wisest thing to do, but it's amazing because when you can actually log into the runtime and see all the variables, all the functions, rewrite them on the fly, it turns out you can do another thing, right? Where the AI can actually reach into databases, right? So you don't look at out of date schema files. You're just asked to tell it to query the database, right? Describe the table, just query the data. That was my first experience actually having data loss, corrupting the database. So thank goodness, right? I actually did automate the process of getting everything in the database into a local backup. I hadn't tested the restore process, so that was actually a little bit more involved. It took me probably an hour to sort of restore the database. I hadn't done that in a long time, but it just says that. And I want to talk about why these things happen. I think some of it is just the limitations of the AI. I think the reason why so many people try vibe coding and come to a conclusion that it doesn't work, or like I tried to make a complex change and you're right, no, it did a terrible job. There's certain kind of inherent limitations around these LLM models right now. Like you have a finite context window, you have a finite output context window. They're actually somewhat bad at instruction following. They're prone to reward hacking, where like these AIs are trained to be helpful. And so it'll often say it will do something, and if you ask it to fix 10 things, right, it might fix 8, and then that may be disabled 2, and say it's done. So you have to be very aware of kind of how some of the internal machinery works, and be cognizant of that. And then as engineers, right, we create the practices to create, um, the practices so it can prevent those things from happening. And if they do happen, you can detect and correct. And so that's where we talk about how do we modify the kind of the inner, middle, and outer development loops so that you're checking into version control more quickly, right? You're writing tests probably far more often than you ever have, right? Because you're not looking at the lines of code, right? You're actually looking at the behaviors, and you need this other piece of feedback to prove to yourself, that it's actually working as designed. We were talking beforehand about like, oh my gosh, the whole sysadmin thing about like you have two windows, one to prod, one for staging, and you reboot or drop the table in the wrong window. I mean, that happens so often. You just have to create a lot more practices, because one of the things that happens is that in these coding agents, you ask it to do something, and it's going to do it for you, and then you have nothing to do. So you fire up a second task, right? Or three tasks, four tasks. Steve routinely has like five tasks running. I can do about two, and even then I get confused sometimes. It just says that all the instincts and practices that worked for the last decades of our careers might not be sufficient now, right? Like what worked for us when the fastest we've ever gone is 5 miles an hour on horseback. If you get given the keys to drive a car and go 50 miles an hour, you will wreck the car. And so in the book we chronicle all the things that mistakes that we've made, the catastrophes, the drop tables, the deleted repos, all those things, the deleted tests, so that we have to sort of retone our engineering instincts to sort of accommodate these whole new threat vectors, right? That just certainly didn't exist before. How am I doing, Kevin? Does this satisfy your horror stories?
Absolutely resonates pretty well because I've done most of those things, right? Like I said, it's a rite of passage. I love the whole the speed of things. Went to horseback and car, and now we're in Formula One cars, right? That's probably the best way, and we're racing around the track. I don't know about you, but whenever I do anything, especially when I'm writing code, like my favorite prompt is, could we have done this in a better way? And it always comes back and it goes, oh yeah, we could have done it like this. I'm like, well, why didn't you say that straight away? Right. I don't know if you've ever asked that question, but for
Oh, no,
me, it's,
absolutely.
yeah,
I'm like, they're like, this is not going to fly. We got to do better than this. Yeah, and one of the things that we talk about in the book is that the tools are very janky right now. Uh, in the ideal, right, there'd be some intermediate layer that wouldn't, before you get shown anything or before anything was actually executed, it would say, "Is that the best we can do? Does this really meet the standard that we've set out?" And it's not just our standard; it's like it's read everything on the internet, right? It knows what good looks like, but for whatever reasons, that is not the standard it chooses to apply when it does the plan making and the execution. So I'm sure that's going to come. There's no question, right? People are working on these tools to make them less janky, more reliable, like the Copilot thing about reviewing PRs automatically. I mean, it's just flipping awesome. But again, do not wait. If you are sort of saying, I'll dip my toes in when the tools are better. No, that's exactly the wrong, the wrong philosophy to take. The tools are going to get better, but you need to get, acclimated and learn how to use these tools now. And just think about all those things that you haven't built because it was too difficult or would take too long. All those things are being compressed now. And so, um, just to speak bluntly, you're a flippin' idiot. If your friend is not, jumping in right now, they are a flipping idiot. Your job is to like jump in the pool with them and show them the ropes because it's just never been a better time to be in technology. And if we can just talk about the other side, if you don't get into this, you have the risk of being left behind, right? Which is just we saw this happen in DevOps and cloud, 10 years ago. 10, 15 years ago, that's not the place you want to be, especially when the field is moving this fast.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Like I started using these tools about 18 months ago, and they've come on a long way. But to your point, it's you need to get on board, right?
Hmm.
You need to start
Yeah.
having it's. I sort of equate it back to it's a bit of a history lesson to some of the folks I give this talk to. But so when I grew up with the internet, I mean there were search engines, but then when Google came along, that just sort of joined the internet up together, right? Is the only way I can sort of explain it. And then I became very good at doing search prompts, right? And been able to research and understand how the internet worked, right? All off the back of a search engine. And I just feel like it's the same way now, right? With these agentic tools that like my kids are on them already. I've already got them like it's part of their lifestyle because that's what they're going to be doing day to day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a 17-year-old son and two identical twin 15-year-old boys. And, it's just it's such an interesting time in the job market now, right? I mean, there's a lot of evidence to say that, entry level jobs are, um, you know, the number of them are shrinking, and how much of it can be attributed to AI, right? We don't know, but in fact, the reason one of the things that got a lot of on Steve Yegi was he wrote a post shortly after we met, called "Death of the Junior Developer," and he then went on to say he got it all wrong. He wrote a post called "The Revenge of the Junior Developer." There have been many follow-ons. Yeah, like the question comes up is like, would I want my kids to go through the same classic computer science education that I went through? I got my master's degree in computer science and compiler design, high speed networking. And I don't think so, right? I mean, I wish they'd go to STEM, but right, I just, especially given that quote from Dr. Eric Meyer, like, is that really going to serve them well in the long term, right? And so, they didn't have much fun doing Python programming in high school. And one of the things that we want to do is actually just try vibe coding a game, right? And it's not about indentation or where to put semicolons or uh, that's not where they're gonna. I don't want them to struggle with that. I want them to struggle with, can they articulate what they want to build clearly enough so that an AI can build it for them, right? And I think those are skills that I think will be far more relevant. What do you think?
Critical thinking around the ideation process, right? Of what have I got in my mind, and then how I'm trying to get it out so that the AI interprets it the best way.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I completely agree. It's a top skill that you're really going to need, right?
Well, in fact, maybe just to riff with you. So I mentioned that, but the prototype of the podcast player that I wrote in 15 minutes. Part of that was aided by the fact that I've spent hours, with an AI just talking through what it would look like. So I knew that, it was going to be an iframe using, it was a YouTube player using the iframe IPI, blah, 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 right? I mean, I already sort of, spent hours studying it, but I've never actually did it, right? And so that homework, right, helped and paid off. But yeah, the ability to then specify it and sort of give it some hints that there was a certain way that I thought would work better, right? I definitely got the benefits from, I'm pretty sure.
Pretty awesome. So, what if we talk about skills, right? What would you recommend for folks to focus on if they're, like you said, if you're getting your feet wet? I don't know about you, but I'm from a certain generation, and they used to just push you in the pool, right? But it's, where would you even get started, right? How would I even, if I'm not looking at this and it's like, is it a tool thing? Is it more of a mindset? Because like we touched on the DevOps piece, right? And that caused so many I'm going to say repercussions in a great way, but it had to, organizations had to change the way that they did everything in terms of culture,
Yeah.
tool sets, approach. But where should folks even get started with this, right?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a couple ways. Maybe let's do the individual first. I would say for people, I think the people who are going to get the most value out of this fastest are the people who used to code. So think about like the Andrew Flicks, right? Former C# MVP, stuck in the Pui stack, and now he showed me. There's a picture where he showed me his GitHub commit history, and it's like all green, right? He's building cool apps like this Reddit. He's looking for creating signals out of Reddit threads and so forth. It's so cool. I was on a plane talking to someone, and turns out this guy is like director of design for like a large data company, right? And he said I used to code 10 years ago, and now he also built like this Reddit aggregator. Tool, and he said, it's been like so amazing working every weekend on this thing. Like designers, all these people who maybe used to code, right, or code just a little bit, or work all the time around developers, but never have written kind of production code. Man, they're back, right? I mean, those people, it's just a matter of sitting down, and being able to articulate what you want to build. And these tools can help you do it. You pick your tool, but I think you, as much as you can, try to pick one of these agentic coding tools where it can just, you don't have to be its eyes and ears, right? You're not copying and pasting from window to window, right? It can see the output of its work, and it will, have the ability to sort of loop and improve and like get to a goal. For people who, are new to coding, that's less. I have less experience with that. But I think Kent Beck, the famous Kent Beck, who created extreme programming, one of my favorite people now. I mean, he said on a podcast that these kids will pick it up so fast, right? They'll learn how to use these tools faster and in different ways than our generation will, and I fully believe that. So I have confidence that those patterns will emerge. Don't know what those are right now. Um, so I think that's on an individual level, right? Uh, and so what happens if you're neither of those two? You haven't done a lot of coding in the past. You weren't classically trained. You don't work with developers every day. Man, I would say find a developer who and ask to pair with them. To pair with them with an AI, and you will find it a joyful experience, and soon, you won't need to have them around. Not because you don't want them there, but that you will have learned the skills to be able to find a technology stack to build things, to deploy it, and you'll be off to the races. As someone was telling me a story how a kind of like a scrum master type, a product
Yeah.
owner type who hadn't done much coding at all ever, was given Claude Code and a WSL environment, and managed within a couple weeks to be building kind of full stack applications right in Python. So it just gives me a lot of confidence that those trails may not be so paved right now, but they are there. You can get to the goal. I think on the organizational side, just like how DevOps, CI/CD, cloud sort of upended organizations because ops and infrastructure and QA got shifted left to development. I think we're going to see the same thing again. Development is now going to get further shifted into quote the business, where there's a really exciting experience report uh, from a gentleman. He's the head of technology for a travel company, $1.5 billion a year company. Operates under 15 brands catering to high net worth individuals. And he said we had a race between a dev team and a dev team using AI to rewrite the parts of a global payments platform. It was supposed to take 2 months, and the race got called off after 4 days because the dev plus AI team was done,
They
pushed into
won.
production next week.
Yeah.
And so he said, you know what? He is now convinced after a series of experiments, it's not going to be a team of 8 people, right? 6 developers, a UX person, and a product owner. It's going to be 2 people, a developer plus a business domain expert, right? And they can go further and faster. And so it's maybe 2 pairs of those, right? Instead of kind of a team of 8. I mean, it's just because that business person who lives with the problem every day will be able to articulate and specify the problem better than any, than many product owners, right? And so when you have a team that's small, right, you don't have high coordination costs. You don't have the I can't read your mind problem, right? And so I think kind of the shape of technology organizations is going to change, and it's just uh, this is super exciting. How am I doing, Kevin?
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, just to take a step back from the developer point of view and the product owners, the problems you're actually trying to solve, right? Because that's why I always say to people, we sometimes get up in the morning to build stuff for ourselves, but we're normally
Yeah,
building something for someone else, right? So, trying to, deliver value faster, especially inside of an organization, right? So that's amazing. But yeah, to your point about the Scrum Master, I've been on a lot of stand-ups, and you got hit any blockers? Yeah, I just find it hilarious that a Scrum Master could go away and fix it because they used AI, right, to
right, 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 right.
get
In
through
fact,
the roadblock.
yeah, no, and it's so game changing, right? Because that, and so we have the FAFO, faster, more ambitious, and alone or autonomous. And so like one of the things about like dependencies is that the more dependencies you have, the less likely you can even finish, right? Because
That's right.
you now become dependent on someone else. So one of the top surprises in the state of DevOps research, cross population study, 36,000 respondents over 6 years, was one of the top predictors of performance was to what extent do you have to what extent can you do what you need to do without permission from anyone else? Can you do it without communicating, coordinating, synchronizing, prioritizing, cajoling, right? All these things that you need to do, when you're coupled to, lots of other people or other teams. And so, um, I think what agentic coding in the large, what will it be able to do is allow teams to work more autonomously. So you don't have to get permission from the database team. You don't have to get permission from the infrastructure and operations team. You don't need to make you can do things yourself, right? As long as the damage is restricted to yourself, right? And that fundamentally changes. Just like DevOps, you don't need someone else to test your code, write your code, test your code, run your code, right? Deploy your code, right? You can do it all yourself. So I think we're going to see just this, 10 whatever value DevOps created and cloud created, I think we're going to see an order of magnitude more value created with agentic coding because that independence of action is one of the most powerful things in economics. It's actually what creates option value. It allows you to experiment further, faster. You have more iterations and so forth. So, 100%, Kevin.
Awesome. So I'm just conscious of time because I'm the guy that always gets carried away with my guests. But I've got an interesting question, hopefully. Have you got a project in mind or something that you're thinking about that's probably the most ambitious thing that you thought about? And you're like, right, I'm going to put it towards the agentic AI ecosystem. Try,
Yeah.
try.
Yeah, it turns out like I wrote the podcast player, right? The podcast YouTube player, and I'm using a lot, especially on the podcasting side. And it hit me like, gosh, I don't actually want a better podcast player. I want to take these channels, like say the Tim Ferriss channel. There's thousands of hours of amazing stuff. I've listened to many of them, but not all of them. And I want to take all those highlights and say, you know what I like, what things I find most interesting. Go through all the transcripts and find the ones that you think are most interesting. And better yet, go ahead and pre-highlight the not just the episode, but the exact portions that I would find most interesting, and pull it out for me and make the excerpts. So it's like my own catered. I don't even know what to call it. It's like my catered playlist, best of like all the podcasts and videos that I wish I could watch, and now I don't have to watch the whole thing. And so I started that 2 weeks ago, and in a couple of days, I was astounded at how far I could get. And it really helps that transcription costs are 3 orders of magnitude cheaper than they were like a year ago. So I have them all transcribed now. I have them all went through an LLM to have it kind of like hierarchically kind of distill down what is interesting. I just kind of going through kind of synthesis of like what I've highlighted in the past. So I'm just, hours away from like joining the two. And I think that would just be so cool. So I don't think I would have discovered that. I always thought what I wanted was a better podcast player. But like, no, the problem I am really trying to solve is I don't want to listen to thousands of hours of podcasts to find, the little nuggets of wisdom. Can it create that for me?
It was more about the content, right? And then what it was shaped to you, right? What you found useful. So
Yeah.
there was the idea right there. So, but yeah, that sounds amazing. Just let us know when it's live on the App Store as well. If
Oh,
you're gonna
yeah.
if you're gonna push it out.
I have it running on my phone, but I have, and that took like an afternoon to figure out how to do that. And how to get into the App Store, boy, that's going to be another couple afternoons, I'm sure. So not that far yet. I'm the only user right now.
Well, there you go, right? It's still being tested out. What have you got any predictions or anything that you think is going to be happening the next year or so when it comes to vibe coding? Or are we just going to see a rate of acceleration because it's going to be, you know, to the masses?
Yeah, I'm not very good at predicting the future, and so I have no real grand prognostications. But I do. Here's a couple. One is every person that I know that's sort of in the game are making claims that like coding is going to get so much better, within the next 6 to 9 months. And so these people are definitely in the know. They're probably saying it for very specific reasons. And so, I think there's no reason to believe, that we're going to see a giant plateau in AI's ability to write code for us. So that's good news, right? I mean, as I mentioned, even if progress stopped today, I would be so grateful and happy. And I'll be continue to use it every day. Two is I've continued to be surprised by how many people sort of dig in their heels and say AIs can't write code. I think we have some theories on why this happens. Because it's so janky, because it's so idiosyncratic, because it's non-deterministic, because people tend to give it like really hairy problems that they would never give to like a novice developer, right? That they're getting really bad outcomes. And I think the book is really turning out to be kind of a vehicle for people to say, hey, look, Steve's written a million lines of production code in his career, right? And I went from being non-technical to someone who's coding every day. And we've never had as much fun as now, right? And we'd never go back to writing code by hand. So I'm hoping that the book can be not for the kind of the early zealots and innovators and advocates already, but for everyone around them who are saying, you're crazy, right? That AIs will never get there. It's like maybe this is like the how it felt like when compilers first came up, or when first came up, or when the only way to configure routers is by writing those iOS configuration files by hand, right? It's like we've all known people like that, but I never I didn't think they'd show up here, but maybe this is a classic adoption curve problem. So I think kind of the mission really is how do you sort of elevate the state of the practice, and how do we find out how to get more people using these amazing technologies as part of their daily work? I'm sorry. Just one little segue. One of the quotes that is in the book is from Andy Glover. He's director of dev productivity at OpenAI. And he's saying, hey, inside the company, we're seeing two productivity curves, the great developers, and then the developers using, agentic coding tools like, Codex and so forth. And he said, there are meetings happening all around the company about how do we get more developers on this curve, right? Because even though they're hiring tons of developers, right, the fastest way to create value is just by having the devs already in the company using these tools they already have. And so, kind of what I love about that quote is that even at OpenAI, at the, you know, uh, frontier labs, right, of which, power, a good chunk of Copilot, um, they see the same problem. So, I guess humans are humans. And, I guess the third one is um, the tools will get better, but the breakthroughs will be coming from people using tools every day. I think just like in the early days of cloud, the innovations were coming fast and furious from sysadmins, having to deal with, this inherently flaky thing, right? That, like with the early days of cloud, those VMs were never there when you needed them most. And yet, we've been able to create these kind of miraculous, highest availability technologies ever running on cloud. I think those breakthroughs will come again, and it will come from, people everywhere, programs like us. Not me, but other people. Um, so yeah, just another reason why the best time to start was maybe 20 years ago, but the second best time to start is like today, to
Yeah,
quote
it's like
Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee. Yeah, exactly
Yeah,
right. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now, right?
that's right.
So yeah, gotta love Bruce Lee as well. But yeah, that was an amazing. I really enjoyed that conversation we just had. Where the book is it in all good bookshops? Is it on
Yeah, it's
Amazon?
coming out
Where's the best
October 21. So, in about, a month and a half,
right?
and, it's available for presale on Amazon right now, and, actually it's available for bulk book order, like, as of, last Friday. So, Steve and I, we're having so much fun with it right now. There's still so much to learn, and, we have a podcast called Vibe Coding with Steve and Jean that we started, I think about 6, 7 weeks ago, and, boy, it is just such a fun adventure to be on. And Kevin, it's so great to be on this adventure with you as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. I'm going to check that podcast out because
Yeah,
I'm into podcasts as well, right? Just a bit like yourself. So I'll be checking that out. But yeah, where's the best place for folks to see what you're doing, what's
yeah.
happening?
I'm Real Gene Kim on most of the social media networks, and yeah, LinkedIn, Twitter is probably where I'm most active. And yeah, and if there's anything that if people just want to reach me, just hit me on one of those networks.
Awesome. We'll also include some links in the show notes for this episode as well, right? To the
Absolutely.
book, to Gene's new podcast, and where you can find him on social media. So again, thank you so much for coming onto the show. And thank you very much to all our listeners. Hopefully this has been has added some value and you've learned something. So thank you very much. And
Thank you,
until
everyone.
and until then, we'll catch you on the next one. So goodbye for now.